Ethiopian Investment Holdings, which is a strategic investment arm of the government of Ethiopia, as well as the Dangote Group, have signed a shareholders agreement to develop, construct, as well as operate a world-class urea fertilizer production complex in Gode, Ethiopia.
What happens when a nation decides it will no longer beg for the tools to feed its people? Ethiopia has just answered that question, signing a $2.5 billion deal with Nigeria's Dangote Group to build one of the largest fertilizer plants in the world, right in the Somali region. A facility designed to pump out 3 million tons of urea every year, turning the tide of Africa's fight for food sovereignty. But why fertilizer? And why now? Could this single plant really change the destiny of an entire continent? Let's find out. When the announcement was made in Addis Ababa, it wasn't just another signing ceremony. It was a declaration of intent. Ethiopia and Nigeria's Dangote Group, Africa's largest industrial conglomerate, had just inked a $2.5 billion agreement to build what is being hailed as one of the largest fertilizer production complexes on the planet. For Ethiopia, a nation that has wrestled for decades with food insecurity and rising fertilizer bills, this was not merely a business deal. It was a bold proclamation of independence. The numbers themselves are staggering. The new plant, located in Gode, Somali Regional State, is expected to produce 3 million metric tons of urea fertilizer annually once completed. To put that into perspective, Ethiopia's entire national fertilizer consumption has historically hovered far below that figure. The plant's capacity will not only cover domestic demand many times over, but also position Ethiopia as a net exporter, giving it leverage across East Africa and the Horn. This isn't just about one country feeding itself. It's about one nation stepping up to supply its neighbors at a time when global fertilizer markets remain volatile. Equally significant is the ownership structure. This isn't a case of foreign investors dictating terms while the host country watches from the sidelines. Instead, Dangote Group holds 60% equity, while Ethiopia's own Ethiopian Investment Holdings (EIH), the government's sovereign wealth and strategic investment arm, retains a substantial 40% stake. In other words, the profits, the influence, and the control will remain firmly in African hands. It's a structure designed to balance capital and expertise from Nigeria with local sovereignty in Ethiopia. For once, Africa is writing the rules of the game. The mechanics of the project are equally ambitious. It will include an extensive pipeline system, transporting natural gas directly from the Kalab and Halala fields, two of Ethiopia's underutilized gas reserves. That gas will serve as feedstock, ensuring the plant is not dependent on foreign inputs. The timeline is set: 40 months until completion. If deadlines are met, the plant could come online within 4 years, instantly transforming Ethiopia's industrial landscape. At the ceremony, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was blunt about what this means. This is a decisive step toward food sovereignty. Those words resonated because Ethiopia, like much of Africa, has been caught in a vicious cycle of importing fertilizer at exorbitant costs, leaving smallholder farmers unable to access enough supply to maximize yields. By turning natural gas into fertilizer, Ethiopia is converting underground wealth into food security. Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest man and the mastermind behind Nigeria's massive refinery and fertilizer empire, echoed that sentiment, calling the project a landmark partnership that shows what Africans can achieve together. But the story is not just about Ethiopia and Nigeria. The ripple effects of this deal extend far beyond borders. If Ethiopia succeeds in completing the plant as envisioned, it will catapult the country into the ranks of the world's largest fertilizer producers. It will also challenge the dominance of foreign companies that have long treated African farmers as captive customers. For the first time, African states are poised to supply one another with one of the most vital agricultural inputs, and to do so at scale. Yet even with all the excitement, questions remain. Can Ethiopia execute a project of this magnitude in such a short time frame? Will the Somali region, often sidelined in Ethiopia's national development, finally reap the rewards of industrial investment? And most importantly, why has fertilizer become such a battlefield in Africa's struggle for survival and sovereignty? The answer lies in the harsh reality that agriculture in Africa is both its greatest strength and its greatest vulnerability. More than 60% of Africans rely on farming for their livelihoods, yet the continent imports billions of dollars worth of fertilizer every year from suppliers in the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. That dependency has become a chokehold. Whenever international prices spike, whether due to war in Ukraine, shipping disruptions in the Red Sea, or currency devaluations in African economies, farmers across the continent are forced to scale back planting. The result is predictable: smaller harvests, higher food prices, and entire nations scrambling for grain imports to fill the gap. This is why fertilizer is not a technical detail. It is the front line of Africa's struggle for food sovereignty. Without enough of it, yields can collapse. In fact, African farms often produce less than half of the yield seen in Asia or Latin America, not because the soil is barren, but because fertilizer application is so low. According to the African Development Bank, the average fertilizer use in Africa is just 17 kilograms per hectare, compared to over 100 kilograms per hectare in South Asia. That staggering difference explains why Africa imports food that it could easily grow itself. For Ethiopia, the pain has been acute. Every planting season, the government has had to scramble for foreign currency to import fertilizer, negotiating credit lines with banks, or pleading with donors to cover the gap. Smallholder farmers, the backbone of Ethiopia's economy, have faced shortages year after year, forcing them to ration fertilizer or skip it altogether. In a country where agriculture contributes more than a third of GDP, that shortage is nothing short of an economic trap. Now consider the global picture. Fertilizer is dominated by a handful of international suppliers, and Africa has often been at the mercy of their pricing strategies. When natural gas prices soared after Russia invaded Ukraine, fertilizer costs doubled in Africa, sparking warnings of a looming food crisis. In East Africa, governments were forced to subsidize fertilizer at unsustainable levels, straining national budgets already weakened by debt. For African leaders, the lesson was brutal but clear. Whoever controls fertilizer controls food, and whoever controls food controls power. That is why the Good Project is revolutionary. Ethiopia is not simply building a factory, it is seizing control of the most critical link in the food production chain. By transforming its own natural gas into fertilizer, it ensures that farmers are no longer at the mercy of global suppliers. More than that, it signals a broader continental awakening. Across Africa, leaders are realizing that food sovereignty begins not with importing seeds or tractors, but with ensuring a reliable, affordable supply of fertilizer. But the stakes go beyond economics. Food insecurity fuels instability. When fertilizer prices rise and harvests fail, unrest follows. From Sudan to Kenya, food inflation has sparked protests, and governments have fallen under pressure. Fertilizer, then, is not only about farming, it is about political survival. Ethiopia's leaders know this. By locking in a massive domestic supply, they are also insulating themselves from external shocks that could otherwise destabilize the nation. And yet, the story deepens further. Ethiopia's choice of where to build the plant in the Somali region was not just about geography, it was about strategy, resources, and regional influence. Which raises the next pressing question. Why was God chosen as the heart of this continental gamble? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. If fertilizer is the battlefield, then God is Ethiopia's command center. The decision to place the plant in this remote corner of the Somali region was not an accident. It was a masterstroke of industrial strategy. For decades, the Somali region was viewed as peripheral to Ethiopia's national development, overshadowed by the political and economic weight of Addis Ababa and the Fertile Highlands. But beneath its arid landscapes lie a hidden asset: natural gas fields that have remained largely untapped. The Kalub and Hilala gas reserves, discovered decades ago but underexploited due to political instability and lack of infrastructure, are finally being mobilized. Fertilizer production is one of the most energy-intensive industries in the world, and urea plants depend heavily on natural gas as feedstock. By building the facility next door to these reserves, Ethiopia ensures a steady, cost-effective supply line. Instead of paying international suppliers for imported gas or fertilizer, Ethiopia will now turn its own natural resources into high-value agricultural input. In essence, Gold transforms from a forgotten frontier into the beating heart of Ethiopia's agricultural industrial future. The location also solves a logistical puzzle. Gold's proximity to Djibouti's ports offers a vital export corridor. Once the plant begins producing, fertilizer can be shipped directly from Ethiopia to markets across East Africa and the Red Sea. Kenya, Sudan, Djibouti, and even Yemen and the Gulf states stand within easy reach. This positioning transforms Ethiopia from an importer struggling with shortages to a regional supplier with strategic leverage. In the long term, gold could become synonymous with fertilizer, the same way the Niger Delta is associated with oil or Silicon Valley with technology. Beyond exports, the plant's presence in gold carries profound political significance. For years, the Somali region has been marginalized, seen more often in headlines about conflict than development. Locating the plant, there is a statement. The region is not just a periphery, but a central player in Ethiopia's modernization. The construction alone will require roads, housing, schools, and healthcare facilities, injecting investment into a region that has long demanded inclusion. Thousands of jobs will be created, not just in the plant itself, but in the industries and services that will inevitably grow around it. For young people in the Somali region, this project offers an alternative to migration or unrest. It offers purpose. But the vision for God extends beyond urea. Dangote and Ethiopian officials have hinted at diversification into ammonia-based fertilizers like ammonium nitrate and ammonium sulfate, which are essential for different crops and soils. This adaptability ensures that Ethiopia's farmers will not be locked into a one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, Gold could become a fertilizer innovation hub, tailoring products to meet the diverse agricultural needs of East Africa, from Ethiopia's teff fields to Kenya's maize belts and Sudan's sorghum farms. Choosing gold also sends a subtle geopolitical message. Ethiopia is staking its claim as a leader in the Horn of Africa, and doing so not with military bases or diplomatic rhetoric, but with industrial might. By anchoring such a transformative project in a historically underdeveloped region, Ethiopia shows it is serious about balancing national growth while projecting regional influence. It is a reminder that power in the 21st century will be measured not just by armies or speeches, but by who controls the inputs of food security. And yet, even with all these advantages, the story does not end here. Building in God is a massive industrial gamble. It raises a crucial next question. What will this mean for the people on the ground, the jobs, the skills, and Ethiopia's rising influence in the region? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. When Ethiopia chose to anchor a multi-billion-dollar industrial project in Gouda, it wasn't just investing in fertilizer, it was investing in people. The Somali region, long sidelined in the national narrative, now stands at the center of Ethiopia's economic future. That shift is monumental because it transforms a community that once felt excluded into a critical stakeholder in Ethiopia's industrialization. The project is expected to generate thousands of jobs during construction and thousands more once operations begin. But the impact of these jobs goes far beyond paychecks. In a region where unemployment, especially among the youth, has been a persistent problem, steady work opportunities provide stability and purpose. Every worker hired at the plant represents not only income for a household, but also a reason for young people to see a future at home rather than looking abroad for survival. This alone could change the social dynamics of the Somali region, turning it from a source of outmigration into a magnet for opportunity. Alongside jobs comes something even more valuable: skills and knowledge transfer. Fertilizer production is a highly technical process that requires expertise in chemical engineering, industrial management, and advanced maintenance. Dangote Group is bringing with it decades of experience, and Ethiopian engineers, technicians, and students will have the chance to learn from some of the best minds in the African industry. That expertise will not remain confined to gold. Over time, Ethiopian universities, polytechnic institutes, and training centers will absorb this knowledge, creating a ripple effect of skilled professionals across the country. What begins as a fertilizer project could quietly fuel an entire generation of Ethiopian industrial experts. But the influence doesn't stop at Ethiopia's borders. Once the plant is operational, Ethiopia will no longer be a passive player in the fertilizer market. It will be a regional supplier with power and leverage. Countries like Kenya, Djibouti, and Sudan, all heavily dependent on fertilizer imports, will inevitably look to Ethiopia for a reliable supply. That shifts the balance of influence. For decades, East African nations have had to look outward, negotiating with global suppliers. Now they will look inward, to a neighbor who can provide a product more affordably, more reliably, and without the political strings often attached to imports from Europe or the Middle East. In practical terms, this new role could translate into diplomatic capital. Just as oil-rich nations wield influence through energy, Ethiopia could extend its reach through fertilizer. Food security is non-negotiable. Nations cannot risk shortages. By supplying the key ingredient for stable harvests, Ethiopia gains bargaining power in trade negotiations, regional alliances, and political cooperation. What once was a weakness, dependence on imports, becomes a source of strength. There is also a symbolic dimension. For decades, Africa has been framed globally as a continent that exports raw materials while importing finished goods. Ethiopia's fertilizer plant flips that script. It represents Africa taking raw gas and turning it into a high-value product that can be exported. This move aligns perfectly with the vision of Pan-African self-reliance. Africans solving African challenges with African capital and expertise. The symbolism of Ethiopia and Nigeria, two of the continent's most important nations, joining hands to deliver this project, is not lost on observers. It is Pan-Africanism expressed not in speeches, but in steel, pipelines, and industrial output. Yet, for all the benefits in jobs, skills, and influence, one final question looms even larger. Fertilizer production is not just about industry or exports. It is about something far more existential. Because at the end of the day, this project is really about who controls Africa's food and whether the continent can finally achieve true food sovereignty. Throughout history, empires have risen and fallen not only by the sword, but also by their ability to feed their populations. Africa, with its vast arable land, has paradoxically remained a net food importer. The reason is not that the soil is barren, but that the tools for productivity, especially fertilizer, have remained under foreign control. This $2.5 billion plant is Ethiopia's declaration that the cycle ends here. Food sovereignty goes beyond having enough to eat. It means being able to decide how to grow, when to grow, and at what cost. For too long, African farmers have been trapped in systems where their productivity depended on shipments arriving from abroad, often delayed or priced beyond their reach. That dependency made governments vulnerable to the whims of external suppliers and the volatility of global markets. A sudden conflict in Europe or a spike in gas prices in the Gulf could ripple through African villages thousands of kilometers away, shrinking harvests and driving up hunger. By producing fertilizer domestically, Ethiopia removes that vulnerability. Farmers will be able to access inputs at more predictable prices, aligned with local realities rather than foreign currency fluctuations. This stability could unleash a transformation in agricultural output, enabling Ethiopia not only to feed its 120 million citizens, but also to supply surpluses to neighboring countries. In an age where food has become a political weapon globally, Ethiopia is building its shield. But the symbolism goes even deeper. This project embodies the Pan-African dream of turning raw potential into sovereign power. For decades, the continent has exported coffee, cocoa, oil, and gas only to re-import finished products at inflated prices. Godi flips this paradigm by showing what is possible when Africa refuses to be just a supplier of raw resources. It demonstrates that African wealth can stay in Africa, be processed in Africa, and serve African needs first. That is the essence of food sovereignty. Not begging for survival, but building for prosperity. The timing could not be more significant. Climate change is placing unprecedented pressure on African farmers, with unpredictable rainfall and recurring droughts. Fertilizer is no longer a luxury. It is a lifeline that can mean the difference between resilience and famine. By guaranteeing a steady domestic supply, Ethiopia is not only preparing for tomorrow's harvests, but fortifying itself against climate shocks. In this sense, gold is not just an industrial plant, it is a fortress of resilience. And then there is the continental impact. A Nigerian company and an Ethiopian state investor coming together to solve a shared African challenge sets a precedent for others. What if Angola's oil wealth were used to build processing plants in the Sahel? What if Kenya's tech capital were harnessed to modernize agriculture in Malawi? The gold deal is not just a project, it is a template. Ultimately, this plant is a statement about destiny. Africa has the land, the water, and the people to feed not only itself, but the world. What it has lacked is control over the inputs that unlock that potential. Ethiopia, with Dangote's partnership, is reclaiming that control. This is food sovereignty as both practice and philosophy, the belief that no nation can be free if it cannot feed itself. So, when future historians look back, they may see gold not just as a fertilizer hub, but as the moment Africa began to bend its destiny back into its own hands. And that leads to one final question. If Ethiopia can do it, why not the rest of Africa? Let us know in the comments section. Do you think it really is impossible for Africa to achieve great things? Or is it just the fault of the leaders that they don't try? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.